Coming up, it is your betting day special. Odds and props and lines, final predictions for the New York Football Giants taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars on Sunday. Andy's back. We've got our Andy back, and we're going to break down what to expect in what could be a 6-1 start for the New York Football Giants. All coming up next, right here on OGP. That is right, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where, as you know, we are your hosts. Over here, Adam Armbrecht breaking down the Brooklyn Nets, fresh off a win. Over on the Locked On Nets podcast with my boy Doug Norrie, and yonder there, the seasoned generational ticket holder, the healthy, wealthy, and wise, Mr. Andrew Makowitz.
Shout out to Adam for holding down the fort the last couple of days. Was away on business. It was really tough in the 90-degree weather of Phoenix, Arizona. But the listeners told me that you did admirably. They said that they almost didn't miss me, but they asked for, Andy's bet of the week and all the predictions for the game. So we had to come back in one more time.
100%. Marty, true blue flyer of the show, he was in on Friday's episode saying he had his own. I'm gonna save it. There's gonna be a head-to-head potential betting bonanza here later in the episode, but people are looking. They're hungry for it. And by the way, we had to go back. I said this on yesterday's episode. Got to go back and do a little bit of tracking of how Andy's bets of the week have gone. I think there's been some hits. There's been a miss or two, along the way there. Not that we're trying to discourage anybody from staying on board with this thing, just like the New York Giants. You got to ride with Andy all the way through if you really want to get to the good stuff.
This is what I learned. I believe I'm 3-3 right now, so I'm kind of treading water. But what I've learned from a lifetime of gambling is you can't just pick and choose the picks that you want to make from someone. You have to ride the whole wave out, because the second you get off of it, that bet is going to hit more than any other bet in your lifetime.
That's why when Doug Norrie and myself put it on for the parlay, Kyrie Irving to lead the league in scoring and Ben Simmons to lead the league in assists, you go ahead and you pick yourself up a Honda Civic off of that bet. The bottom line is, friends, New York Football Giants, the Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked a lot about some of the matchups. The one thing that we got clarity on after yesterday's episode and coming into today is from an injury standpoint, no Azeez Ojulari in this one, no Oshane Ximines in this one. Quincy Roche is going to be playing in this one, we would assume. So as the Giants get healthy, what is the theme? They also get more injured, although Saquon Barkley fully off of the injury report altogether ahead of Sunday's game. A little bit surprising in a great way to see that.
Yeah, it's glad to see Saquon Barkley's completely off. Also, Andrew Thomas does not have an injury designation, Adam. So those two updates were really good. Obviously, the Kadarius Toney stuff is frustrating. They ask him how he's doing. He was doing a bunch of sprints off to the side. They asked him if he feels good. He says he feels pretty good. Mm-hmm. And then they asked him when he's going to play, and he said, "I'm not going to give you any of my secrets." So that's the latest update on Kadarius. He's not giving any secrets away by being out.
Was he baking a pie? What did he got in there? What's in the secret sauce, Kadarius? Come on, open up your recipe book.
I don't know what that actually means. Mm-hmm. It's fine, but what I will say is we'll probably see a little bit more of Quincy Roche, knowing that Ximines and Azeez Ojulari are out. Yep. Probably going to see him fill in a little bit more. Dan Duggan and others don't expect Landon Collins to be called up, but that could be the emergency valve that they pull in this game, depending on what Wink wants situationally.
Yeah, and then Cordell Flott out with the calf as well among the injury list. So it is what it is. Questionable for Feliciano. So hopefully he gets back out there as well. That's the general gist of what to expect on the New York Football Giants side of things. Overall, there's one, I want to touch on something very quickly here. I talked about it yesterday. We'll probably talk about it again down the line just because it's pertinent. It's the biggest non-on the field news of the NFL. Christian McCaffrey gets traded to the San Francisco 49ers, a 2, a 3, a 4, and a 5th round pick the following season. Does something like that in your mind enter? Does it enter? Not in your mind, let's say, because I had this conversation yesterday where I was like, as a fan, I don't care necessarily about that. Do you think it enters into Joe Shane's mind when you hear that the Rams and the Bills were also in these conversations? They could be interested in talking to the Giants, maybe about Saquon Barkley, understanding the state of the season. But if you're Joe Shane, are you deliberating what is my long-term plan with Saquon Barkley for this team? And is something like that package or around there, does that all of a sudden at least pique my interest a little bit?
Well, it's funny because the McCaffrey thing is another piece. You saw Todd Gurley also announced his retirement, which I thought was interesting too, because he ended up getting paid a year early, and then he had degenerative knee issues. He only
Yeah.
played. Do you know Todd Gurley only played 6 years in the NFL? Like
I felt like he
he
was around for a decade. Yeah.
yeah, only 6 years. It's because early on he had two All-Pro seasons where he was like the best running back in the league, and you
Right.
just thought, man, this guy's going to be around forever. Right after he gets the contract, he kind of goes away. Christian McCaffrey signed his big deal. Obviously, he's had a ton of injuries. Has only played, I believe, 17 games over the last 3 seasons, so
Hmm.
it's been pretty tough. But what it screams to me is that there still is a ton of value in really elite running backs. Now, can you get a guy in the fifth or sixth round that can, get 80, 70% of the
Hmm.
production? Sure, you can. And that's what most teams end up doing. That's what San Francisco has done for quite a while, is find these guys like Elijah Mitchell, Trey Sermon, Jeff Wilson Jr., whoever it
Yeah.
is, they pick these guys up and they plug and play.
I had some jerk try to offer me Jeff Wilson Jr. for Rashad Bateman, like after the trade had been announced. And I'm not saying
Uh,
that Rashad Bateman is like, like he's setting the world on fire. He's been injured. But this idea that you're going to offer me the guy that literally just got dumpstered to 0 carries per game for anything was sorry.
yeah, that's a slippery move. I'd keep my eye on that person for the rest of the fantasy season. It's like
That's
I don't
right.
trust anything that's coming from you. But in terms of the haul, it shows that elite running backs still get a king's ransom. Like that was a lot of draft capital that the Panthers were able to accumulate just by getting rid of Christian McCaffrey and also getting his money off the books. It's like if you're going to start a rebuild for Carolina, this seems like the right way to do it.
And think about it too. Like, and that's what I mean, because it's the 49ers who, after saying they were going to go with their young rookie quarterback, then he has a terrible injury. Now you're back to Garoppolo, and seemingly you're back to the idea of, and we can go win a championship now. Like, now we can go win a championship that we went back to the quarterback that we already had. However, there's a urgency there, right? So you're willing to give up a lot to get this missing piece. The Rams look like they're willing to give up a lot because they can't quite get themselves back on track. The Bills are ready to go win a championship this year, and it's almost like a Christian McCaffrey, a Saquon Barkley. Now we're talking about kind of putting the crown jewel, the finishing touch onto this offense. I mean, specifically with the Bills, and I know because there's the Joe Shane connection there, but when you think about everything that they have right now on that team, and you think about adding Saquon Barkley to it, like it really, you'd be saying, get the F out of the way, because now you're talking about having one of the elite talents at wide receiver, one of the elite talents at running back, or if not one of the best quarterbacks in the game, right? Plus, to go along with, you added in Von Miller to go along with that defense. Like, you've done everything the right way to get to this point. And that's where I get very curious, man. Like, if the Bills came calling to Joe Shane and said it was 2, 3, 4, and a 5 for Christian McCaffrey, and honestly, Saquon's had a better year this year, as we know, like he's come back with such a resurgence here this season. What if they say, we know it's going to be probably the last pick of the first round, but we'll throw a first round to pick at you. It could be a 1, a 3, a 4, and a 4, like something like that. Again, it's hard to do it because the Giants are having a great season, and that's what we're focused on. But if you're Joe Shane, these are the conversations you are legitimately having, even if the fan base doesn't want to hear it.
I go back to this one idea of culture, and that's the hardest part of this. It's not necessarily the player and planning for the future. It's they are actually building something, and Saquon is the heartbeat of what they are building. And the first
Do you
question
think he is, though? Like, do you? And I know what you mean. Like, right now he is, but is he the next season heartbeat?
he is, because you can see what he means not only to the team that he's playing on,
Mhm.
the fan base when they watch him have these explosive plays. He says everything right in the media, and on top of that, look, you have guys like Odell Beckham that are still reaching out to him. Like every other
Oh
player in
yeah,
the
well
league
respected, well
acknowledges
loved.
that he is one of the top 5 talents in the NFL. And there is something to say about building that culture of like, this is Saquon's team. He's the guy. I love playing with him. He's electric. I want to be a part of it. If
Mhm.
you ship him off when the Giants have a winning record, you're basically waving the white flag and telling all these other teams, we know he's great. We know he's great culturally, but we don't want to pay these guys. It almost would make everyone in the locker room look around and be like, do you mean to tell me you do all the right things and you're not going to be part of the future here? What are we doing?
So then the last two questions for me, and then we'll get into this game with Jacksonville. One, because I discussed this a bit at length yesterday. One, So you're saying that Saquon Barkley is back on this team next season. He's 100% a part of this team. He's 100% going to be either franchise tagged or signed to an extension, right? You're saying he is a part of the future for the Giants.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second part would be there is no version and within reason of this package that the Rams or the Bills or a team could come and say, like I said, hey, we'll give you a 1, a 2, and 2 threes over the next couple of seasons for Saquon Barkley. You're saying it's no matter what. And I get the point that you're making. I think it's a valid point of like everything that we've been preaching about, Saquon is representative of, and it's hard to cut ties with that while also understanding if you look into the next offseason, the next draft class, and say you want to add 3 or 4 more draft capital, something that when we talk about going and getting wide receivers, we've heard from the media and the coverage of the team say Joe Schoen values draft capital above all else when it comes to this rebuild. He doesn't even want to give up a 6th round pick. We're talking about a scenario where he gets back multiple top end picks.
Yeah, and in the NBA, Sam Presti's a guy that values multiple first round picks and draft assets, and the Oklahoma City Thunder just end up tanking. And it's like at some point they have to turn into something. I fully appreciate it.
Yeah, 100. Yeah, well,
Adam, there is what I will say, very short and sweet on this. There is always a tipping point on almost every player where it would make too much sense. But also, it's the circumstance. If the Giants were to all of a sudden be 5-5 at the trade deadline, they've lost 4 straight. The team looks like they're in disarray, and a team is giving you 2 first-round picks for Saquon Barkley. That's the type of thing that where you got to turn around and say,
Andrew does. You see how Andrew does it here? We've had these discussions before about trades. I mean, he talked about this a little bit with Evan Ingram, friends, if you want to just recall a couple of years ago, where he was demanding a late first-round pick for Evan Ingram, who ended up walking in free agency and signing a bit of a sweetheart deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Not to put these guys remotely on the same footing. But
I understand. My tipping point is much higher. Yeah. My tipping point would be much higher than what everyone else would be. And if you're the Buffalo Bills and you're like, well, we're going to give up the last pick of the first round next year, and then
another
bottom late first round pick the following year. Like we're in it to compete the next 2 years. Could we give up those 2 late first rounders? That might even be on the trade machine, a second, a third, a fourth, and a fifth. Like it could be relatively close.
You know what? Not for nothing. We'll move off of this, but it's a fair point of saying like if you're the Buffalo Bills and you're going to franchise Saquon Barkley for just 1 season next year, and you're going to sit there and say, I got 2 years of this guy. It's worth the first round pick, knowing that we think we're going to be AFC championship at worst. Like it actually, the value chart is different for Joe Schoen on a team who thinks he still has pieces to put in place, or for a team that feels like our window is right here inside this moment. And there's a level of sacrifice we're willing to go to. Sunday. That's a Monster Rally. But the NFL will play on Sunday as well at 1 o'clock. The Jacksonville Jaguars. I talked about, is there any one matchup in this that you look at as being critical to the Giants' success? I highlighted, obviously, the young players on the defense with Walker, with Lloyd. There's a dynamic playmaking there for the Jacksonville Jaguars that I just say, keep an eye on it, right? Because just because the stats aren't there yet, it doesn't mean like young players all of a sudden have a breakout game, right? So I have my level of concern there on the defensive side. Was there a matchup that you're interested to watch for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in the Giants matching up against Josh Allen, whether or not the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen. I know we just talked about them at length. The defensive end, Josh Allen, who has been unbelievable this year.
Player on that defensive front, right? Yeah.
You talked about Trayvon Walker having the strip fumble or pick or whatever in the first game against the Washington Commanders. Josh Allen has been one of the top 5 defensive players in the NFL so far this year. He's got 3 sacks, 7 assists. He's forced 2 fumbles, which is tied for 3rd in the league. He's been everything, and Pro Football Focus gives him an 87.5 grade. Like, he is one of the best. Like, put that in context. We think Andrew Thomas has been playing at an all-pro level. Andrew Thomas is sitting right around the same spot. So that's why it's going to be an interesting matchup, whether Josh Allen moves to the weak side or strong side. Is he going to be trying to get up against Evan Neal? How are they going to kind of strategize and scheme to get Trayvon Walker or Josh Allen on Evan Neal to try to, expose the rookie? To me, Josh Allen on the defensive side is what the Giants need to be looking out for the whole game.
It was interesting, too, because I was talking a little bit about Bellinger yesterday and where some of his measurables were and the quality of player that he's developing into for the Giants. But inside of that, there was an article, I think, on NJ.com that was just talking about the tight end group overall, which has actually performed pretty well now in run blocking specifically, not necessarily pass blocking, but it'll be interesting to see how Kafka and the Giants go about trying to just, protect themselves a little bit. The one thing we don't want to do is what they did against the Dallas Cowboys and said, Evan Neal, why don't you hang out there on an island by yourself? And then watch him get brutalized and say, no, stay on the island by yourself. It was one of the few instances in the Giants season where we went, are you going to do something? Are we going to help the rookie? Why are we leaving the rookie to be exposed? So to your point, if they start moving Allen around, you got to be really aware, especially just on like instant to instant basis. That could be 1 or 2 plays in the game where they flip that defensive line, and all of a sudden that single matchup could be brutal for Evan Neal and then brutal for Daniel Jones.
For the offensive side of the ball, Adam, where you got to go, obviously, is just Saquon Barkley against their defensive line, their defensive front. They, for all the things that people make fun of Jacksonville for over ineptitude over the last decade or so, this year they're playing well on defense. They're almost top 10 in a lot of statistical categories on defense. Yards per rush, they give up 3.6 yards per rush, Adam. That's good for 3rd in the league. They can stop the run. Rushing yards a game, they give up 89. That, again, is 3rd in the league. They don't give up big plays in the run game, and they limit the ability of other running backs to be able to get open and make explosive plays. Obviously, that flies in the face of, we want to run the ball. We are a top 10 rushing offense. We have one of the most explosive playmakers in the backfield. Who's going to win that battle? Is Saquon going to be able to make sure that Daniel Jones isn't in 3rd and long, where those guys like Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, et cetera, can just pin their ears back and really rush the quarterback?
Yeah, this is one of those times where, like, because they give up the 11th most passing yards per game, and I think it's like it's this chicken or the egg, right? Are they giving up few rushing yards because of how bad they are against the pass, and teams want to attack that? But then for the Giants, as you mentioned, are the Giants ready to take advantage of them being terrible against the pass, or they need to rely on the run? And when you talk about the rushing number there, though, that's, I think, the big difference, right? Because you can say, well, a defense doesn't give up a lot of rushing yards, but they're bad against the pass, and that's where teams look to attack them. But 3.5 yards per carry, like that matters. When you try to go to the run, they're pretty stout against it. So the Giants have had this mentality throughout the start of this season of being willing to kind of bang their head against that rushing wall until they break through. Last couple of weeks, a little more passing, a little more, the playbook going. Obviously, Wan'Dale Robinson involved here. So it'll be interesting to see. I cannot look coming off the last 2 weeks, regardless of where the Packers or Ravens are going in their seasons. I can't come off the last 2 games and be any more concerned about this matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But I think you still come into this game the same way you did the last 2 weeks. If you do things the right way, if you execute, you can have success and take advantage of some things. But I still say that the Giants are always on a week-to-week winning in the margins, right? Winning with good coaching, execution, clean football. Like, if you mess up one of those areas, then it becomes a football game. And that's been true the entire season. I don't think it's terribly untrue about this one. Trevor Lawrence does have 9 touchdowns this season. His completion percentage is above 65%. They have a playmaker in Christian Kirk. They have our old friend Evan Neal, whatever his value is, right? Like, there's things there. I don't fear it. I'm not like as concerned as the Ravens game, say, going into with some of the matchups. And for some reason, I'm like, and I should just make sure that I keep myself grounded here. Don't walk in the door going, Jacksonville Jaguars 2-4. Like, okay, like that's the nature of the NFL. That's how you get snake bit.
Well, I think you meant Evan Ingram instead of Evan Neal. That would be a terrible trade for the Giants if we
God,
ended up
imagine
trading
him a tight end, though. God, massive target share.
Hey, listen, if Andrew Thomas can catch touchdown passes, then I'm sure Evan Neal has the ability to as well. Adam, you bring up a good point about the Jaguars. Like I said before, this is not the same Jaguars team that we're used to, just being a basement dweller the entire time. Think about this stat. Plus minus on points scored and against, they are plus 24 on the year, and they're 2-4. So they've outscored their opponents by 24 points, and they are 2-4 on the season. Think about, like, that doesn't even make sense. They're the only team in the NFL that doesn't have a winning record with their point differential. It's bizarre. What it means is,
hold on though, real quick though.
Yes.
What's their point differential?
24.
What was their win over the Colts?
Their win over the Colts was like 24-0.
There you go. So one game accounts for,
they beat the Chargers 28-10,
and that's why
I
said tongue in cheek, because they actually came back 38-10 over the Chargers as well. And just to your point, in their wins, they're winning games. In their losses, lost to Washington by 6,
All
13-6
one-score
against
games.
Houston, right? 34-27 against the Colts in the other meeting they had. So, and that's getting now closer now. They're in 29-21 against the Eagles, out of order here. 29-21 against the Eagles. So this is again where I keep coming back to. Finish your point, but the Eagles played them in a one possession game against the Eagles. Like, this is not a bad team. Don't look at the record.
They have a better plus minus in points scored and against than the Giants do. And we're 5-1, they're 2-4. And I'm saying that I do think that we are an overall better team. We're
Yep.
better coached right now. I do believe that. But this is not one of those teams where they're just the doormat of the NFL anymore. And that's why Jacksonville is favored in this game, Adam. Everyone's talking about the lack of disrespect the Giants have and all that fun stuff that you like to do as bulletin board material. The reality is the Giants are underdogs on the road against a team that their record does not reflect how talented they actually are.
Yeah, and you know what? The other big thing that I thought about this too here, and we'll go inside our bet lines and get ourselves out the door with our predictions as well. But something I think I alluded to yesterday, but I didn't put it in this context. Daniel Jones and Trevor Lawrence. We talk about Trevor Lawrence. I mean, listen, they're both top picks in the draft, top 6 picks in the NFL draft in their respective draft classes. Obviously, there's a lot of expectations for Trevor Lawrence, but I found it fascinating because we talk so much about the steady improvement for Daniel Jones, the steady growth over the course of the season. In this season, going from week 1 through week 6 for the Jacksonville Jaguars, 50.9, 95.4, 71.2, 12.1, 31.8, 63.2. Those are Trevor Lawrence's QBRs. And again, there's some really nice numbers in there. There's some big performances where he threw for 286 yards, etc. And by the way, had a bad QBR rating, which is what we're always talking about, playing in those ratios and those margins. But that can be a big difference. I did say this yesterday. Peterson came out, head coach of the Jaguars, and said, we haven't learned how to win games yet. We're a young team closing out games. But you look at Trevor Lawrence and the volatility, right? Something really smart that the Giants have done is just try to tighten everybody up and say, we're gonna play this thing very close to the vest. We're gonna churn out the yards. We're gonna play really smart defense. We're gonna start to get some turnovers, and that's how we're gonna get ourselves across the finish line for wins as opposed to losses. If Trevor Lawrence starts playing consistent football, that's what opens up, I think, a different path for the Jaguars, whether it's in this game or just for their season overall. But that's a great feather in the cap of Daniel Jones and the Giants. Our quarterback, slow and steady, making it happen, not making the mistakes. Trevor Lawrence willing to do it, and I think that's because there is that weight of expectations. He's supposed to be a Justin Herbert. He's supposed to be in the conversations with Josh Allen's, right? Like, that's the expectation for when you're that number 1 overall pick in an NFL draft, and he hasn't gotten there yet. So I think there is a weight to that.
Yeah, Doug Peterson as the head coach of the Jaguars, obviously considered an offensive happy, quarterback friendly system.
Right.
Gonna let Trevor Lawrence throw the ball more and which opens up some of the flaws that he has. Yeah, it is interesting to think Trevor Lawrence, obviously more touted, was considered a generational talent coming out, like an Andrew Luck type talent, can't miss prospect.
Yeah.
And so far this season, the way that they're managing Daniel Jones has looked better than Trevor Lawrence has, even though Trevor Lawrence can throw for 280, 300 yards on any given day.
Listen, winning ball games, that's what matters in the NFL. So at least in this season, as we've now said a handful of times, Daniel Jones is amongst the better quarterbacks in the league this year. And that's all we're talking about. Sunday, the game will be 1 o'clock, obviously, down in Jacksonville. If you're over on betstamp.com, which this show is brought to you by, you can go ahead and get plus 3.5 over on DraftKings. If you want to take the Giants and get the points, you can lay -3 over on WinBet if you're going the other direction. Plus 145 on Superbook if you want to get that money line action. -152, your best chance over on Profit Exchange for the Jaguars if that's your nature. Over under 43 or 43.5, depending on where you go. Andy, just on the betting lines first before we get into Andy's bet of the week. What are your initial takeaways there when you see some of those numbers? Specifically, I think we always like to talk about the over-under there being at 43, 43.5.
My first thought is Vegas is looking at the same thing. They're taking away the records and they're taking away 5-1, 2-4, and they're just looking purely at the teams themselves. The Jaguars have been in 1-score games and ended up losing. The Giants have come back from double digit down in the second half multiple times this season. And they're basically saying on a neutral site, these teams are basically even. Like we would have it almost even if they were playing out in London between the two of them. And so most Giant fans will feel disrespected because they're like, how could a 2-4 team against a 5-1 team be this, getting a field goal. It makes no sense. To me, the initial reaction is, yeah, Jacksonville is a decent team this year. And again, the Giants are going to have to prove to everyone that they can win games that people expect them to win in order
Yeah.
to get more respect in this. Because right now, I don't believe anyone truly believes that the Giants are a team that can go into any other person's building and just steal a win because they're 5-1.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Packers game in London, neutral site. Ravens game, home game. Not expected to win either one of them. Not expected to win this game. So it's a little bit of the same approach. By the way, 3 out of the last 4 games for the Jacksonville Jaguars, you'd be talking about them hitting the over, right? Big numbers against the Colts, big numbers against Philly, big numbers in their win over the Chargers. So in terms of the over or the under, and with the way the Giants play in 1-score games, it would. Boy, I tell you, if you're going to take the under in this game, you have to be thinking it's going to be primarily a little bit of a defensive struggle in a lot of ways, because it's hard for me to look at this game, and maybe you disagree, and say, well, one team is going to blow out the other team to the tune of 24-10 or whatever that number may be, and still hitting the under or moving towards it, as opposed to it being something that maybe it's a little bit closer, whether again, 1-score games for both these teams. Where do you sit on it before we talk about your bets? I mean, do you think that this is blowout opportunity for the Giants? First chance to really blow out a team, or, we're laying out some real scenarios where it could be a tight one?
I don't think this is going to be a blowout by any means. I don't
A
think
lot of people are calling for that, by the way. Like, a lot of people are like, Giants disrespected. Watch this 27-10.
that would be a bigger surprise to me than even the Jaguars winning the game, to be quite honest with you,
Yeah.
because the Jaguars have offensive firepower. Like, let's not forget that Trevor Lawrence is there. They have Travis Etienne. They've got James Robinson. They went out and signed Christian Kirk. They've got Marvin Jones Jr. They have weapons,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they've been able to manufacture and put up points this year. So for me, I hear
Right.
that, and I'm like, okay, they're scoring 23 points a game. They're top half of the league in terms of points per game. They actually score more points than the Giants do, I believe. So it's like, I think. Go ahead.
No, it's hard for me to think that even in the scenario where the Giants break out offensively, okay, great. It's hard for me to think, though, that the Jaguars then won't grip it and rip it and keep firing their shots, even if it ends up coming at the cost of Trevor Lawrence finishes with 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but they keep coming at you on the offensive side of the ball. So even if the Giants are up 27-13 at one point in this game, I won't be shocked if it finished 31-24, right? Or 31-21, whatever it may be. I feel like they're going to keep coming in that sense. So the Giants staying with their script of trying to grind it out and keep this thing a little bit more congested, like that seems to have been their path to success here. But I'm not ready yet for the blowout victories for the Giants. I haven't quite gotten there for them just yet.
Not by any means, Adam. It's going to be a slugfest. I'm concerned at the Jaguars' ability to move the ball down the field, that the Giants could fall behind again against a team that they should be, and it's going to be on the road again. And can they just keep continuing the script that they've been writing all season?
And before we give our game predictions, we head over to Andy's bet of the week.
Yeah, Adam. So this one feels.
Oh no, that was not a great start. Andy is
No,
not confident.
I'm no. It's more like I don't understand why the line is where it is,
Here
and
we go.
the answer to that one is Wan'Dale Robinson over receiving yards. If you had to take a shot at it, what do you think it is?
I bet they're disrespecting him. Let's put it at 37.5.
It's 30.5, Adam.
Oh
So
my
it's even
God.
lower
I was
than that.
disrespecting him at 37.
He was on a snap count. He only played
He had 15
14
snaps last week, and
Yeah,
he put up 30.
Again, Adam, I looked at that and they're like, we wanted to get him involved and acclimated. And acclimated he was by scoring his first career touchdown last week. They're going to give him more and more plays. They're going to need him in the passing game. To me, if he catches 5 balls and averages 7 yards per catch, that's 35 yards right there. That to me feels like I'm living in bizarro land, even looking at that line, thinking like, how can he not reach that if the Giants are going to be competitive in this game?
I'll go even further. It's 2 catches for 16 yards apiece, and he's over the 30. Yeah. What was that? What was that at? Plus what?
30.5. I believe it was minus 112. So it's like, it's at just pretty generic odds.
Yeah.
But to me, that feels like the best bet. You know he's going to get targets. They're going to increase his snap count in this game. To me, that seems like the easiest one. The reason I shy away from the touchdown is because touchdowns are very subjective. It's like, does he get the ball at that one time?
Right.
Where 30 yards over the course of the entire game, to me, seems pretty ludicrous.
And where was the touchdown number on him? Just so we know, because Marty, big fan of the show, frequent flyer. That's his call. He's calling for the touchdown for Robinson.
His pick is plus 350. So you get
That's my kind of guy.
3.5 to 1 on your money, which is great. But listen, we could both win. If Wandale catches a 40-yard touchdown pass, everybody in the dance is happy.
You better believe it, man. I don't have anything particular I'm looking in this one, honestly. Sometimes I like to go with those sexy multiple game parlays. You know what I might do? Maybe I'll take Wandale Robinson over on the yards and the touchdown. Maybe I put those two together. Why stop yourself short? Go ahead and move that needle a little bit. Prediction time, baby. The New York Football Giants, we said, they are getting 3.5 points, depending on where you look. The over-under is 43.5. It's Sunday. It's 1 o'clock. The Giants are 5-1. This is cementing yourself in that playoff picture. It's maybe making the statement that you need to start respecting us around the NFL. What is your prediction? What's your outcome here?
Adam, I've been thinking about this for a while because I am petrified of this game. Like, I am more nervous about this game than I was about the Ravens game. We both thought that the Giants would come in and win against Baltimore, and they did.
Yeah.
This game, it feels like a trap game. The Giants are finally getting all the press and the publicity about how great they are. They got to travel on the road against a team that looks like they're bad on paper, but actually is way more talented than you think. I'm very concerned. This, to me, I don't know if the way the Giants are winning, being down and having to score touchdowns in the fourth quarter
at some point.
At some point, you're gonna come rue the day that you started this whole trend. And so for me, I don't know if I do not have a good feeling about this game. And as an unbiased person trying to look at this game, if I was strictly thinking about betting, I would probably take the Jaguars in this one. And so for me, I have a final score of Jacksonville 24, the Giants 17. I think these double-digit fourth quarter deficits and scoring 2 touchdowns with under 6 minutes to go, at some point, it's just not sustainable. I think this might be the reality check that the Giants are going to have to say, we have to play better and score more points earlier in the game.
Yeah, I this has been the thing that's just haunting all of us, right? Hanging over our heads. It's how many times can you say, well, we'll spot you 5, 7, 10, 12, 11, whatever. Like, we'll just keep spotting you points. They took it as deep as they could in the Ravens game, as they have this season, as deep as they could possibly. I like the idea of Wandale Robinson being back and getting more of a sample size here. I think that helps in that passing game. And that's I think the needle mover here in terms of being able to stay in games early or even be leading, dare we dream, at halftime, is by being able to get some of those chunk plays a little bit sooner, because otherwise you are restricted, you are limited. I'll be curious to watch that front seven matchup. A lot of weapons there on the defensive side. As we said, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, have to protect Daniel Jones. If he's getting a little bit healthier, let's start to use those legs a little bit more. I was really close to going with you and saying this is the kind of game that's a bit of the wake-up call. I think there's one, that's not even a wake-up call, but I think there's one of those games coming. I don't think it's this week. You can all look at the schedule and surmise where you think I'm going there. I'm going to take the New York Football Giants in this one. I'm not bullish, but I'm going to go with 26-14 New York Football Giants. I think that it's maybe a field goal late in the fourth to kind of seal it away a little bit, make it a full 2-score game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that the Giants will have their first lead at halftime in this game. And I think it'll come down to them having that lead and then building on in the second half and letting the defense be dominant like they've been in the last 2 quarters of most games.
I love that prediction. Why don't you just say the Giants are leading at halftime, Wandale Robinson over 30.5 yards and Wandale Robinson to score? You've got your parlay built in and you are cashing the check come Monday morning.
Cha-ching. Come on, guys. Look at me go. Listen, you know that we're going to be back in following this game. I'm going to tell you right now, sometimes we do the post-game podcast on Sundays, give you the instant reaction. Maybe, just maybe I'll do that. More than likely, it's been a wild week for both of us. Probably going to be Monday morning, break this one down, grab your cup of coffee. No matter what, win or lose, there's going to be a lot to take away from this game as we get closer to the bye week where the Giants can hopefully start to get healthy. And like I said, keep getting healthy, just start to get healthy, and then see where they stand on that trade market as well, trying to improve this team. You get us on YouTube where we're doing it. Gosh darn it, every single day of the week and breaking down the New York Football Giants. You get us on the podcast feed wherever you get those needs fulfilled. And as Andy Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.